And we're live. Hi, everybody. It's Revenge of the Fifth, and I am very excited to be here with this amazing panel of Star Wars comics creators. Thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Sam Maggs. I am a writer for books like Marvel Action, Captain Marvel, and the upcoming Unstoppable Wasp, Built on Hope. And I have an amazing panel of creators with me today to talk Star Wars. So I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves. Panelists, I have some questions for you that I would love for you to answer. I would love to know your name. I would love to know what your Star Wars work is. And then I would also love to know what your favorite Star Wars movie is and why. So why don't we start with Jody?
I'm Jody Houser. I've written, the Rogue One adaptation. I'm working on the upcoming Rise of Skywalker adaptation. I adapted the Thrawn novel, and I also wrote TIE Fighter and the Age of Republic series. I kind of feel like I can't have a favorite Star Wars movie because now, like, having adapted two of them, like, the two of them are just works, so that kind of screws up the whole thing. But, like, I guess if I had to pick one, it would still be, the original, because that kicked it all off, and it's still such a solid movie.
I love that. Greg. I'm just going in the order on my screen here.
All right. My name is Greg Pak. I am currently writing the Star Wars Darth Vader ongoing series. I also did the last run on the previous Star Wars ongoing series, and I did a bunch of one-shots as part of the Star Wars Age of Rebellion series. So it's been a kick. And then we're doing favorite movie. Is that what? I'm sorry, I spaced out.
Favorite Star Wars movie.
Favorite Star. It's such the cliche answer, but I'm going to say Empire, particularly right now because the Star Wars Darth Vader book picks up immediately after Empire and explores everything from Vader's point of view, which is kind of stunning. We're so used to thinking about that from Luke's point of view. It's like, oh no, Luke's all traumatized and everything, but Vader too is traumatized and reacts or deals with trauma much differently than his son. But yeah, so Empire has been sort of endlessly rewarding to think about. I will also say though that the prequels are growing in my estimation. I'm old, so I was like 8 when the first Star Wars movie came out, and so I'm original series all the way. But in doing this Vader book, I've been watching and rewatching those prequels, and there's so much amazing stuff in there, and it's been just incredibly fun to be able to dig into that and pull it into this Vader book and explore it from other perspectives and get different angles on everything. So it's been a kick.
Kieron.
Hey, I wrote Darth Vader, and then I wrote Dr. Aphra, launched that, and then I moved over to Star Wars, and then had a little rest.
Kieron, wait a minute. I thought Greg wrote Darth Vader. How is this possible?
Impossible. But there are multiple timelines of Darth Vader. I did after A New Hope and Empire, and then Greg did after Empire, and someone else did a different time period, which will be interesting to discuss.
Fast. Who knew? Star Wars, anything's possible in Star Wars. It's amazing.
And my friend, before I started writing Star Wars comics, my answer would probably be Empire. But like after writing Star Wars comics and doing the weird deep deconstruction of everything that you do, I just become increasingly obsessed with A New Hope. It's just this kind of it's this airy creature. It's such a weird movie for a movie which people sort of say invented the modern blockbuster. The hero doesn't turn up for 20 minutes. That's weird, and it's got this incredible purity to the fairy tale structure to it, and it's like so much invention in every panel, and it's the more I look at it, the more I find it inspiring in that way.
Cool. And Charles.
Hi, so I am Charles Soule. I have written a lot of Star Wars, which has been very rewarding and thrilling. I started with a Lando mini, then I did Obi-Wan and Anakin. I did a long run on a Poe Dameron comic. And from there, I wrote a Darth Vader comic, which is funny. We have a lot of Darth Vader writers here, which is very appropriate for Revenge of the Fifth. I am currently writing the Star Wars title, which relaunched with a new #1 recently, setting it just after Empire Strikes Back. And the other big book I did was Rise of Kylo Ren in comics, which told the story of Ben Solo's turn to the dark side. And then the other thing I'm working on for Star Wars, which is a lot of fun, is launching the High Republic storyline and initiative with Light of the Jedi, my novel coming out later this year. So that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. Those are all really good answers.
So not that much, huh, Charles?
No, and I dodged the movie question too, because I think like that's kind of, it can be controversial in many circles, like where you put your Star Wars favorite. But I think putting the original trilogy aside, because I think most people would probably put those first. I have to say, I just rewatched Rogue One yesterday for Star Wars Day. That was my like Star Wars activity, other than a lightsaber fight in the yard. It's great. Like it's real. That's definitely one of my favorite of the recent ones, if not my favorite.
I love that. So we have original series, we had a little prequel mention, we have the spin-offs, and I will say that my favorite is Force Awakens. So now we have a full spread of all Star Wars possible content represented here, which is actually very cool. So for all viewers who are here right now, if you have questions for our panelists, you can pop them right into the comments box, and we are going to get to those last 15 or so minutes of the panel. So please, if you have questions, don't be shy, ask them. We would love to get to them. But until then, I'm going to ask some questions. So I would love to go in the reverse order. So we'll start with Charles, and I'm just so curious, and I think a lot of people are probably curious as well, but how did you come to writing Star Wars comics? I don't think that's it's not something that a lot of people get to do. It's pretty exciting, and I'm curious about your journey getting here.
Well, it probably is somewhat similar to Kieron's in a way, because it's really two words, Jordan White. Marvel got the Star Wars license from back in, I want to say 2014, somewhere around there. And then they decided to relaunch with a Star Wars flagship title, which was written by Jason Aaron at the time, and then Kieron's Darth Vader series, and a few minis. And as far as I know, every writer at Marvel at the time approached the editor of that line, Jordan White, and said, look, hey, I've heard of Star Wars, and I think I could do a heck of a job. And if there's ever a chance to write anything, please remember me. And I was one of those. And Jordan and I had conversations about Star Wars before, so we knew that I knew who Salacious Crumb was or whatever. And so when the time came to open up a second wave of Star Wars miniseries, he approached me and said, well, who would you want to write? And I put in pitches for Lando and Palpatine, and both went pretty far down the road. Obviously, the Lando one is the one that I ended up doing with Alex Maleev. But that's really what it was. Just, Jordan cast those first set of miniseries with creative teams that he thought would work. And I was incredibly lucky to be asked to do one. And I think it went well. And so I got to do more over the years, which has been amazing.
And Kieron, your story is similar?
Yes, actually similar. I was the person who didn't actually flirt up the editor. So I just got a random call from Jordan one day. So, do you want to write a Star Wars book? And it was, I think it was specifically because Darth Vader was going to work so closely with Star Wars. And I'd worked with Jason before. I wrote Uncanny X-Men when he was doing Wolverine in the X-Men. So I'd also worked with Jordan quite intensely. And in terms of like the two books being the sort of like lead books in the fleet, and then we're so, he was so used to me in terms of being able to deal with stuff. And there's also the fact that I just spent my entire time at the Marvel universe writing villains. It's like all my heroes weren't great. And it's like what people generally responded to was either villains or characters who were increasingly becoming villainous. So I imagine he went, maybe that guy had something to say about Darth Vader. And it turned out okay.
I love that you played it cool and Charles went the opposite route, and you both came to it at the same time. It's like, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah, I pursued it, no doubt about it. I really wanted it.
I'm that kind of person too. Don't feel bad. It's okay. How about you, Greg?
Oh, I don't. I do not. I feel great about it. Anyway.
At the time the Star Wars books launched, I did not pursue it because I guess I was dumb and I had a lot of other stuff on my plate. But over the years, I mean, I'd written the Battlestar Galactica tie-in comics for Dynamite. I'm writing the Firefly tie-in comics for Boom, and I did Planet Hulk. So I'd done a lot of kind of space opera and sci-fi stuff over the years, and then at a certain point, the Star Wars books went over to Mark Paniccia, And Mark he's the editor at Marvel I've worked with the most in my career. He's probably, I mean, if you looked at all the books, I've probably done maybe 200 individual comics with Mark, maybe more. I did Planet Hulk, I did Incredible Hercules with Mark, I did I just tons, and I did some X-Men books with Mark when he was running the X Office, and we bumped into each other at a screening shortly after the time he had taken on the Star Wars books, and he said, "Hey, do you like Star Wars?" And I was like, "Do I like Star Wars?" And a couple of weeks later, he called up and he said, "Hey, we're doing this Age of Rebellion thing. It's a bunch of one-shots with the original series." And I was like, "Oh, what?" So it kind of fell in, you know, I guess years of building relationships plus serendipity led to it. And that Age of Rebellion series was kind of a perfect way to step into it, because it was 8 one-shots, which is a lot harder to do than an 8-issue storyline, because you're basically, you know, an 8-issue storyline, yes, it's complex, but it's one story, right? For 8 one-shots, you're doing 8 stories, and so just the development time and everything else takes longer. But it was phenomenal as an introduction to writing Star Wars stuff, and and laying groundwork, because it was a chance to dig into every corner of the Star Wars universe, you know, branching out from those original characters, from the original series. And so it was great prep. And then there was a certain point when they needed somebody to come on to after Kieron's run on this main Star Wars book, and they called me up and was like, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I was like, "I would absolutely like to do that." And so I started developing that while I was finishing up those one shots, and then while we were finishing up that main Star Wars book, they came to me with Darth Vader, and it was interesting because, you know, Kieron, you said that like you had you felt like Darth Vader was a natural match because you've written a lot of villains. I actually have not. I'm not known as a villain writer. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, I've done some villain books. I did a Magneto Testament book and I did a Red Skull book, but both of those were historical. They were essentially historical pieces that weren't at all about heroics. They were about people trying to survive and turning into either heroes or monsters during the final solution in the rise of the Nazis. It was. And so it was a different creature, but I think the whole. I mean, I developed really good relationships with everybody at Lucasfilm and in Mark's office, and I mean, was really hungry to keep working, and they were eager to have me keep going. And once we started digging into this Darth Vader book, it's not your typical villain book, because Vader is he ends up as the redeemed tragic hero of the whole. I mean, I guess it's not entirely tragic at the end of it, because spoiler alert, at the end of Return of the Jedi, he's redeemed. But so it's a different kind of development. I mean, it's about a person who loses their soul and then regains it. And so there's this giant emotional and moral arc to this story that is just, it's kind of great meaty stuff, and it's not just like, I think it's distinct from writing a book about a pure psychopath, which is incredibly hard for me to do. I mean, that's what I did with the Red Skull book, and it was, you know, because it's basically about a orphan who grows up during the Weimar Republic and becomes the world's worst Nazi, and that was really sort of difficult and disturbing, you know, for me to wrap my head around. I mean, and Vader books can also have those difficult and disturbing moments, but there is that he's struggling with different things. He has a moral core that he has lost, and ultimately he's going to regain that. But somebody like the Red Skull has no moral core, you know.
Greg,
and yes,
you're one of my oldest friends. But, you know, I don't know if Jody, you know, give Jody a shot. I don't know what you're talking about.
My apologies.
You know
Charles, do my job for me. No, but I love that answer, because I do feel like so often the way that you come to projects, especially in entertainment or in comics too, is the answer is always kind of a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck. And I see that thread through all of these, and I wonder if it's the same with Jody.
A little bit for sure. I definitely wasn't someone who approached the Marvel editors when they got the license because I was so early in my comic writing days at that point. I didn't have those relationships yet. But and appropriate for the channel on which this is being broadcast, I met Heather Antos at New York Comic Con in Artist Alley one year and was talking Star Wars with her. And we both figured out we both really liked Thrawn. And we'd kept in touch over social media and talked about Thrawn a fair amount of that. And because I had done a number of adaptations and licensed books, I got my start doing the Orphan Black comic, which was sort of a weird hybrid of a adaptation with a lot of new material added in. So that sort of became what I was known for. So when they were looking for someone to adapt the Rogue One movie that was coming out, Heather reached out to me. And, you know, at the time we didn't know a ton about the movie. And I was just like, it's Star Wars. I'm not going to say no. I hope it's a really good movie and I can do this because I hadn't actually adapted a movie before. So I'd done like bits of TV shows and I'd done some novels at that point, but a movie seemed like a whole other game. And of course, there's such a history of Star Wars comic adaptations of the movies. It's like, I don't want to be the one to like ruin this great thing, but it ended up, I love the movie, B, happy with the work I did, and that sort of got me in the door. So then when they were looking to adapt the first Thrawn novel, Heather knew from extensive conversation that I really liked Thrawn, so she reached out to me about that. And that was almost more intimidating in a way because I kind of credit Zahn as being one of the big things that kept me a Star Wars fan, you know, because I watched the original trilogy as a kid, but there was a long stretch of my life where there was just no new Star Wars content before the prequels. Yeah. And I was like a little young to get into the RPG and stuff that kept it going for so many people. But when I found those, the original Thrawn trilogy in bookstores as a kid, I was just like, there's more Star Wars and it's books. And it was like the best day of my life. So, you know, it's so key to my love of Star Wars that was, sort of an intimidating place to step into, but Tim was really great. He loved what we did with his book and his character, and that's kind of like the best compliment you can get when you're working on something like that.
I think that's so common to a lot of Star Wars fans where we're all just looking for more content, more story, more additions to the universe, more stuff in this amazing blueprint of a world that we have available. And you guys have all been able to add so much to this universe, which is incredible. Let's stick with Jody. I'm curious, this might be like picking your favorite child, but I'm curious to know what your favorite addition of yours to the Star Wars universe is, if you could pick. Is there like, and it could be anything from like this huge character like Afra that I added to like this one weird thing in the back of a panel that no one's ever noticed that I personally think is hilarious, or anything like that. Yeah, what would you say is your favorite, Jody?
Oh, I mean, I think overall, like in terms of projects, my favorite was the Age of Republic books, just because I got to tackle so many different characters and just flesh out some bits that, you know, maybe we didn't get to see in the movies or they hadn't really touched on in the Clone Wars animated series. But if we're just talking like specific moments, I think my favorite might be adding Saw Gerrera's last words, which was Stila, and like his memory of his sister that he had lost many years ago in the fight. And like, that was just like, I'm like, how can I make something even sadder?
It's great. I love that.
I think the internet favorite thing that I've added though is the Togorian Jedi and the Count Dooku issue, because I keep seeing him pop up everywhere and everyone's just excited there's a Jedi who looks like a big tiger.
What about you, Greg?
I probably the droid character that we've got in the current Star Wars Darth Vader book. Vader's one of those. It's kind of funny. It reminds me a little bit when I was writing the Hulk, Planet Hulk. The Hulk should not talk a lot, and similarly, Vader shouldn't talk a lot. You derive a lot of power by not speaking. It just in everyday conversation we make so much normal people or nice people make a lot of effort to help conversations go along. We nod, we say, "Oh yeah," we throw in little things to kind of make the other person comfortable in conversation. The Hulk doesn't do that, and Vader certainly doesn't do that. And so they're not characters who are going to be prone to explaining things. You're writing a character like Deadpool or Amadeus Cho or I don't know, Star-Lord. Those characters talk all the time. Peter Parker, they just talk. So they don't really need somebody around them who talks. But Vader does, and so and so coming up with a character who would make sense for that role that was distinct from stuff that had happened before was key. Kieron had done a brilliant thing introducing a droid called 000. I've got that right, Kieron, right? And it was basically an evil 3PO. It's a protocol droid, looked like 3PO, but he was evil, and was delightful because he had that kind of urbane, British, flair that 3PO has, but he's evil, and so with Z67, I didn't want to just do that again, right? It's a great idea. We could have just cribbed it, but our take on it was instead that Zed is a forensics droid. He's helping Vader basically go to crime scenes. Vader's trying to find everybody who had anything to do with hiding Luke from him and making Luke weak as he sees it, and he wants to destroy them. And so Zed is along for the ride to kind of look at the scenes and do he's the brains, he's the data processing guy and everything.
And droids are always such a fan favorite.
Oh,
which is
yeah,
great. There's so much you can play with.
Yeah,
with
and
that.
And so what we did with him is he has no moral judgment. He is just really there to do his job, and he's sort of and there's something endearing about the way he's just gung ho to find out what's going on, there's been some pretty good response to him, and it's weird to talk about chemistry with Vader and anybody, but there's some kind of chemistry with the two of them that I just really like.
How about you, Kieron?
Well, it would be. I mean, I'm literally staring at a Dr. Aphra, BT, and 000 figure on the wall. So choosing anything, choosing anything but those three would be kind of a lie. But at the same time, my favorite thing I got to write, I got to write the Darth Vader realizing he has a son moment. Literally writing the inversion of I am your father. I have a son. Getting to write that was a hell of a thing. Well, I'm going to say probably the most important addition to canon was Han Solo chopping wood shirtless. Which I gave to the world.
I'm gonna agree.
We did a Tarkin shirtless thing in the Tarkin one shot, and people lost their minds. I didn't think it was anything that people, but yes, there's a contingent out there that was extremely happy.
There's a contingent. Everything is a contingent for somebody. There's no matter what you do in Star Wars, somebody's gonna think it's.
We had hashtag sexy Thrawn going when that first issue came out because he's stranded on a planet and has a ripped open shirt and the long hair. Mm-hmm. Apparently, this Lucasfilm story group had extensive discussion over whether Chiss could grow facial hair to see if he would have a beard or not. And apparently, they decided Chiss do not grow facial hair, so we did not get beard daddy Thrawn, I guess, but.
There's a character named Ren in the Rise of Kylo Ren who is he basically his thing is he looks kind of like Darth Vader without the suit, so he's all burned up and charred and whatever, and but he's still very fit and muscular and cool looking, and so there's a bunch of people saying that he was hot, which I guess I get it. They might have just been because he was burned, he's hot. Yep, right. Anybody? Pretty good. So, but to answer the question that was actually asked earlier.
No, this is great. We could just talk about hot characters in Star Wars all day. I'm fine with that.
You know what? So my favorite thing that I did, they all, I've been very fortunate to do a bunch of different things in Star Wars, and they all have moments that I really love. I was really hugely gratified by the fan response to Rise of Kylo Ren. It was embraced in a really big way. That was a challenging piece because it came out right at the time of Rise of Skywalker, which obviously featured I can spoil that at this point. It's free on Disney Plus now. So yeah. So Ben Solo dies obviously, and he's a character that people really liked, and people were sad about it. And so to write a book that talked about him, it was like the very next thing coming out. It was like a flashpoint in fandom, and so I was very gratified at how that was received. So that, and as far as individual moments, like the scene where Darth Vader bleeds his kyber crystal to get a red lightsaber in Vader 5, I think, in that series was great. There's a lot. I mean, Star Wars is rich. You can do a lot of fun things in it, and we've all been lucky to be able to do that.
I'd love to go back to Jody to start on this one, because you mentioned that you have worked in a lot of other IPs like Orphan Black. I would love to get an answer from everybody, but starting with Jody, what are some of the biggest challenges when working with an IP like Star Wars? I know you mentioned working with Lucas Story Group. Obviously, you couldn't just give him a beard. Maybe that was a bummer, but I'm sure there are bigger challenges than that. Yeah, what are some of the things that are different when writing for an IP like Star Wars as opposed to writing a creator-owned comic or even for smaller IP?
I think, and I've worked on a number of big IP at this point. Aside from Star Wars, Doctor Who is probably the biggest. And it all comes down to scheduling, which is kind of a boring answer, but you need to make sure that everything has to go through different levels, both at your editors, at the publisher, and then maybe their bosses, and then the licensor, who, in the case of Star Wars, is the Lucasfilm Story Group that you're dealing with. So it means that there's extra layers of approvals beyond doing like a normal Marvel superhero comic, for example. So it is a lot of scheduling, and there are, more cooks. But at the end of the day, I think at least most of the projects that I've worked on, everyone is pretty much on the same boat as to what they want it to be. And I know that's not always the case. So I think luckily there's some good, I hate to use the word synergy because that sounds so boring and corporate, but everyone is working toward the same end goal. So whereas that, I think, can be an issue in licensed comics, it hasn't really been something I've dealt with in Star Wars. Everyone sort of knows what a good Star Wars story should feel like, and that's what everyone's aiming toward.
Anyone else who has an answer can jump in.
Well, honestly, people, this is the first question anyone I don't know about anyone else. This is the first question anyone asks me about writing Star Wars, as in how much you told what to write.
Oh.
That's interesting, as in like how much freedom you have. And like the thing with me and Jason were doing early on is we walked in, we pitched big. And the idea, we were trying to find the limits of what was possible inside the space, because we were ready to be told no. We'd rather be bold than be told no, than just like be a little bit more timid. And the thing that immediately happened was, well, we got told no a lot, but also, we got told, but the story group, for me, working with them, the thing that makes them really very good to be working this kind of relationship is how additive they are. As in, they'll recognize what you're trying to do, as in, you can't do this, you can do that. I mean, a good example might be early on in, like, I had these kind of rivals for Vader. And obviously I wanted to originally use Jedi, but of course there's no other Jedi really available in the period. So the idea of like, you could do something technological though if you want. And at that point I built the entire idea, and that became the whole kind of theme of the book, to be honest. And like just those kind of very small things. And I do some things with Star Wars scripts I never do anywhere else. It's like I'm doing a scene in a bar with a gangster or whatever, and I actually explicitly put in the notes, I can completely make someone up here, but if there's anyone else anywhere in the canon you want to drop in, we can, because it's only a bit part, And so I'm explicitly like labeling, like, here's a good place, and the actual stuff from all over, like the games and the books, they kind of feed that back into you. So they're very giving. That's kind of the main thing I got from them.
That's cool.
Yeah, they've been astoundingly good. Like Jody, I've done a ton of licensed stuff. Some of the same stuff. We're both working on Stranger Things now too, and generally things are fine, like Jody says, as long as the schedule works. And a lot of licensors, I mean, they're under crazy schedules, and comics are not necessarily the biggest part of their, they're not the highest on their priority list sometimes. And so things can take a while just while you wait for them to get back to you, because they're making billion-dollar movies, you know what I mean? And so sometimes the comics are gonna lag in terms of when they can get back to you about stuff. But the Lucasfilm folks are kind of amazing, because they are probably dealing with more than anybody else. And they are and they are, and everything is in continuity, like they've got that, which is nuts. You know, like they're juggling probably they're juggling 100 stories at any given moment, and finding ways for all that to fit together. And that shouldn't work, but it does, because they're pretty great. And but yeah, so I mean, the big challenge is finding that a little place where you can do something that does fit those requirements. It fits into continuity, but does something special, that adds something, you know, that matters, you know. You know, and the challenge with all this stuff is that there's this timeline, and our stories are set into a certain chunk of that timeline, and we know how the big story ends. So we are finding things that haven't been done before, that have their own drama, that have outcomes that can be surprising, or at least the journey towards those outcomes is going to be compelling and surprising. That's the big challenge. And I'll just totally echo what Kieron says. The Lucasfilm folks have been great, because they will. I mean, basically everything Kieron said is the same kind of thing. We shoot for the moon. We pitch the biggest story we can, the greatest Darth Vader story we could ever imagine, or whatever it is, and they will kind of recognize what it is that we're trying to do and try to help make it fit within whatever requirements there are, you know, in terms of like, or what other conflicts there are with other stories or whatever. They will, they're yes-anding as opposed to just saying no, and it's pretty tremendous. Yep.
Charles, did you have anything to add?
I mean, not to what my esteemed colleagues have said. It cool. Really is like that. Story group is there to help us, not to hurt us. And yeah, there have been there are some awesome moments I would have loved to have gotten in, but I would say on average, or by and large, the stuff that you get to do, or the stuff that they suggest that you do, ends up being just as good, if not better, than what you came to them with in the first place. So, and they're just like super cool people. Like, it's getting to talk with a bunch of Star Wars like savants. You know, we're all like, everyone here on this call is really, really good at, but then you talk to like Pablo Hidalgo, who is a pretty famous name within Star Wars, and he'll like be able to reference, oh, well, you know, on page 52 of this bizarre EU tie-in novel from 1989, this happened, and you know, you maybe could pull from that, or this was a really bad idea, so let's stay away from that. Like, there's I don't know. I'm not going to call anybody's ideas out because they worked for their time, but there's some really weird stuff in the EU, and you know, which is great, right? It's super fun. It was the Wild West of Star Wars, and these days story groups, you know, Greg mentioned the way that everything is in one canon and one continuity, and the EU was also to a degree, but story group is trying to like make it all feel like it's got this, it's part of the same history, part of the same mythology in a very specific way, and they do a hell of a job, and I am extremely impressed with everything they do, and the fact that they seem to still like love their jobs. I'm not sure that I would love my job if that was my job every day, but they really seem psyched about it.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll throw in about them is that I feel like they understand how comics work. You know, and that is so critical, you know what I mean, for the licensor to actually understand how comics are made, and also they understand like what that little something that these stories need. You know, they're trying to help us find that little something that's gonna. Even when I was doing those 8 little one-shots, they're just little one-shots, but each one of those fits into canon and tells a little story that means something. You know, like we did you know, and they were helping that happen for just a 20-page one-shot. They want everything to have that little bit of juice.
I love that.
Yeah, I would say they definitely do understand comics in the sense that sometimes I get notes from licensors that sort of, they're not entirely sure how something is structurally working in the comics or how the storytelling is functioning, and I've never had to get notes like that from Lucasfilm. Everything they send is completely story or character based.
That's cool.
I guess like there's one exception, which is like, I just realized it's quite funny because it's entirely understandable. The only hard no I ever get is that you occasionally just get a hard back no for no reason, and you can't work out why, and it's always because it was in a movie, as in it's something that got planned and they can't explain it. So it's like, and it's occasionally just the weirdest thing, and you've got no idea when you see it in the movie, then you laugh. It's like there's one hat I wanted to use from like A New Hope, and that I had no idea why I was told I couldn't use the hat, and it just because it turns up in Rogue One. It's that kind of thing. You know, it's a there's moments when I laugh in the cinema and everyone else must think I'm insane because yeah.
There are moments when like you have to learn that they can't say certain things, and so you're reading between the lines, and oh, okay, so this character, something's going to happen here, so I'll stop asking. I get it, and then you can't ever talk about it until after it's come out, like because just knowing that you can't use it becomes a spoiler.
One more quick question before we jump to audience questions. If you, like you, Jody, Charles, Greg, Kieron, were in the Star Wars, what kind of person would you be? Would you be a scrappy pilot? Would you be a stalwart Jedi? Would you be a Sith? Maybe you've put a lot of thought into this. Maybe you have not, but I'm putting you on the spot right now. Let's start with Charles.
I'd probably be a comic book writer. No, if I was in that world, the thing that I would have for most of my life, I probably would have said a Jedi. But if I can't be Emperor, then I would probably be a pilot. Like that sounds really appealing and fun and something that I would really dig until I blew up immediately. I'd be one of the first to go in the big assault on the giant horrible thing that everybody's trying to kill. But being a pilot would be
You'd burn real bright for a minute.
Yeah, I would inspire the rest of my squadron. Let's do it for Charles. Yeah, anyway.
I love that. Kieron.
Honestly, I'm very similar to Charles. I think if I was in the Star Wars universe, I would be very rapidly dead. That's kind of that would be the important role. I would possibly be just dead. Failing that, I would be like a journalist writing about Max Rebo. I'd be going around reviewing the hot bands, letting people know what the scene's like.
I'm into that. Greg?
I'd be a labor organizer on Bespin making trouble for Lando. That guy's no good. Come on.
I love that. And Jody?
Based on my RPG character that I've been playing in a Star Wars game for 7.5 years now, I would start off with super good intentions, find out I was Force sensitive, and then just fall to the dark side out of sheer ignorance of how it all works, and everything would go terribly.
That's a mood. I totally understand that. That and I would just probably be dead are both like big moods for me.
I feel like the question in terms of like if you're Force sensitive and if you're light side or dark side, just like for me would boil down to how bad is the traffic on the planet that I'm stuck on? Like, am I on Coruscant where you're just stuck in traffic constantly and you just snap and start flinging flying cars everywhere and then you're just done?
I feel like we have that in all of us a little bit. Can we bring up an audience question? Let's grab one of these from the crowd. Megan asks, what was your favorite of the Darth Vader comics that you created? Maybe we'll start with Kieron.
Putting aside the Vader realizing he has a son one, there was like an issue 20, and it's basically a really quiet scene, and it's this guy called Inspector Fanks, who's like a kind of like a Sherlock Holmes type genius detective, but working for the Imperials. And they're just having a meeting, and the whole thing is just a very long, tense conversation. And he basically says, "I've worked this out, and and I brought you here. I'm going to give you this clue. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and now you're going to kill me." And in other words, this guy's this moment of great. This guy's a complete believer, as in he believes in the Empire. He believes Vader has to do what he's going to do, but he's completely sacrificing himself. And it's like, is Vader going to kill this guy who's literally one of the best things in the Empire? He must, if you believe in the Empire, this guy must be useful. And Vader obviously instantly kills him. And it was just a straight character scene. It's about two strong characters going at each other, and it's such a. I think it was Jody who said that you know what a Star Wars story feels like, and it was weird. That was as far as they got away from what you think a Star Wars story would feel like, but it still felt sufficiently born of the world and these characters. I think it's last time. It was great working with you, Anakin, which is just the kind of there's the little capstone. Yeah, I've worked out who you are as well. So that was a lot of fun.
What about you, Greg?
I'm probably gonna I'd probably go with Star Wars Darth Vader #1, the first issue of the new series. Only 2 issues are out. I've written 5 so far. I'm working on number 6, but #1 I think will always feel special to me. It's one of those books that just came together in all the right ways. The team is astounding. Rafaela Ienco is the artist, and he's phenomenal. He's like, he can draw that mask and pick different angles to get different emotions out of it in a very subtle way. And Niraj Menon is the colorist. Joe Caramagna is the letterer, and everybody was just firing on all levels there. I think this is kind of a technical thing, but we were talking earlier about Vader not talking. And this is a very emotional story. It's about Vader kind of rehashing all of his pain from the past, because Luke rejects him and is lost, falls down into that pit, and it's a recapitulation of Vader losing Padme, and of Vader losing his wife. I mean, his mother. The person he cares the most about, he loses again and again and again. And so the story is incredibly emotional, and finding a way to get a Vader inner voice that actually works, because you can't just like slap up voice caption.
Like caption boxes, yeah, sure.
Yeah, caption boxes the way you would sort of like Batman Year One style for Vader. And so it has to be different, and it has to, and so I pitched this idea of like, I want to be able to give a little bit more of Vader's inner voice, but to do it with just a few words at a time, almost like poetry. And I think that's something that Charles had played with that in the big Vader's Castle story. I think your last issue.
Yeah.
How about you, Charles?
Well, God, there's an issue 18 of my run was an issue where Grand Moff Tarkin and Vader basically have a hunt. So Tarkin is like, he grew up on this planet called Ariadu. He was sort of like a great white hunter character, and there's just a story where he brings his squad of hunters. They go to this random planet called Chandar's Folly, and then the quarry that they're hunting is Vader. And so it's Vader and Tarkin desperately trying to kill each other for reasons you don't understand. I wrote that when I was in India on like a trip, and I had just been to a reserve and seen a bunch of animals and things like that, which was beautiful and just put me in mind of that time. And I wrote it really quickly and ended up being one of the best in the run, in my opinion. So it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
I want to jump in because I did write a number of Anakin issues with Anakin in it.
Right.
And I think my favorite of those was actually the Obi-Wan issue in Age of Republic, because this was still pretty early with his with the Anakin Obi-Wan relationship, and Anakin's kind of dealing with the fact that the person who said he would take him in and train him has died, and Obi-Wan has agreed to do that in his place. But that's sort of like you weren't the one who wanted me situation. And he's in the temple and already feeling very out of place because he's coming a lot older than the other kids. He tries to talk about Obi-Wan's childhood, and Obi-Wan was like, no, I don't remember. I've been here since before I could remember. So it's a lot of them sort of working out what that relationship is going to be, from a sort of very odd, not really comfortable place to, getting them to where they'll eventually be like brothers that fall into a tragedy.
I love that. Well, thank you, Megan. Great question. Let's pull up another one. Katie, how is it different writing a comic series as opposed to a novel? Maybe Charles, you want to tackle this one?
Sure. There's a lot of differences. Novels, generally speaking, take a lot longer than writing a comic script, although writing a comic series, like a long run, can take as much time. But the biggest real difference is that when you are writing a novel, you are a one-person band. It's all on you. You get to decide where the focus is in terms of where your reader's eyes are looking and how they're experiencing it, and all of those, like how far you're zoomed in, how far you're zoomed out, the psychic distance of the reader versus what they're experiencing. Whereas when you're creating a comic, you are part of a band, basically, at least in the way that all of us do it, because we're just pathetic writers and can't draw to the level of our amazing collaborators. And so, when you make a comic, particularly a Star Wars comic, you have writer, artist, colorist, inker, sometimes letterer, editor. And so it's all of these creative visions. And then you add in things like story group and so on that are all contributing to make the experience that the reader has. And maybe it starts with the writer, but it certainly doesn't end with the writer. And that is a joyful experience. It's like being in a band or any kind of collaborative creative effort to try to distill the story into this thing that look, that's something. into something that the readers get to do. With a novel, it's all on your shoulders, and you second guess yourself in a way that you don't, or at least I don't in comics. You have to get to a different kind of flow state when you're doing it, because you have to think through every single aspect of it in a way that you wouldn't if you were just saying, okay, in this scene we have 5 people on a Zoom call dry. It's really it's just a different type of focus and a different type of translating the creative vision for the reader. But it's great. They're both awesome.
Great question, Kate. Thank you. All right, Sam. 2 questions. Let's start with the first one. Well, you know what? We kind of covered the first one a little bit, so I'd love to focus on the second one. What inspires you to write your stories? Could be a very deep question as well. Maybe we'll start Kieron this time.
The deepest of us.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Fear of dying and being forgotten. It's one of the things. The greatest inspiration for me is absolute fear of death and everything like that. So yeah, that's about it. In terms of what in specific stories, it's always like, what do you want to do? Like, you get this kind of moments where, like with Vader, it's like, what's this story say? And for me, it was like, Greg mentioned how it's like a period of time. I always end up thinking most of my Star Wars work like historical novels, as in I research the period, and then a story emerges. For me, it was like, you looked at that period and you saw that at the start, Vader had just basically been the sole survivor of the Death Star, and at the start of Empire, he's more powerful than he's ever was in A New Hope. So what happened? That's implied. That's a Fall and Rise story, and there's also, so you tie that together, and all the way through is, again, what does that say? Like my Star Wars run, that was actually, to be honest, it was like that in some degree was inspired when Carrie Fisher passed. In that, when I was looking at that and thinking, this was a really interesting period for Leia, and I wanted to see Leia decide not to become a Jedi. In that, that kind of immediately in the same way. So the whole story was about, okay, let's make Leia more the lead. Let's explore what Leia was like in this period. So it's like you take an idea, then you iterate and you build, and it becomes the kind of Katamari of story. But that kind of core thing is kind of quite pure for me, as in, what's it saying?
Yeah. What about you, Greg?
Well, the crass, practical but very real answer is deadlines and the need to make money. And it is incredibly useful to have deadlines, because all of us, I'm sure every professional writer, I'm sure everybody on this panel has stories that we love, we think about all the time, but we haven't written because there are no deadlines attached to it. And they may be the thing that it may be the best story that we'll ever end up writing, but we can't make it happen until there is an economic cost to not doing it. That's just reality. So having deadlines, I highly encourage finding a way to create deadlines for yourself. If you're a person who wants to write and just can't seem to finally get it done, make commitments that you can't break, and then you will finish it. And it may not be the greatest thing, but it will be done. And then you can learn from that and go on and do more. So deadlines, that's the biggest practical inspiration. In terms of sort of metaphysical or emotional inspiration, it is confusion. If I don't understand something, I have to figure it out, and writing is thinking. So I think my best work is stuff that I have tackled because I don't really know the answer entirely, that there is a journey that I'm trying to puzzle through and figure out. And so it's this process of discovery, and it's honestly, it's just living. It's like, what are we here to do? We're trying to figure stuff out. And so writing is part of that.
I love a crass practical answer, because my answer to this question is spite. So, it's whatever. Maybe that's relatable. What about you, Jody?
Deadlines are definitely, again, on the practical side, because less about I need to eat bills, pay bills and eat food, and more someone is going to call me up and yell at me if I don't do this. So it's probably the fear of disappointing people by missing deadlines. But on the more story side, I think characters and the questions I have about them, like, what was Jango Fett like as a dad when we, aside from the little bit we got to see in the prequel movies, what did the handmaidens think of, Padme and Anakin's relationship, because they obviously knew about it, and things like that, and just sort of getting to poke at those moments and expand them out into bigger stories, because I think you know, if I have the questions, other people are going to have the questions too. And that means there's space there to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. And Charles?
For me, it's always been very simple with Star Wars. I want to try to recreate the experience that I have as best as I can whenever I enjoy one of the really good Star Wars things. So that sort of, oh my God, I can't believe these moments are happening. I can't believe that it's this awe-inspiring. You know, that's not easy, but that's what the best of it does. So why not and try for the best? So that's what I always try to do whenever I read anything. I try to think of what would be the thing that if I was in a theater watching this, I would be like, holy shit, and talk about it for the next several decades because I was so inspired by what I just saw. I don't know if I've ever hit that mark, but that's what I try to go for.
I love that. I think we have time for one more audience question, if we want to bring it up. Austin! Austin would love to hear more about the High Republic series from Charles, which is the new like Jedi history line that we're doing. So
I am sure that you would, Austin. I'm sure that many people would. I am NDA'd so thoroughly on High Republic material that it's not just my job. It very well might be my life to tell you much. But what I will say,
share generally, yeah.
I will. So this won't be anything new, but it is the High Republic is a new era of Star Wars storytelling set about 200 years before the Phantom Menace. It is at a time when the galaxy as a whole is very sort of together and unified and optimistic, and is, while it is not as thoroughly settled and not as developed as it is in eras that we have previously seen, it thinks it can be and is going to do its darndest to make it work. The Jedi are awesome. They wear different kinds of clothing, lots of white and gold. It feels like they're analogs to Camelot and that sort of feeling in it. It's really it's very special. We've met some of the Jedi that we'll be seeing the story through, including a Wookiee Jedi named Buryaga, who's very cool. But mainly it's a huge story that is being told primarily in publishing right now over a set of novels and comics and so on. I'm writing the launch novel called Light of the Jedi, which is out later this year. The other four creators and architects of the High Republic are Cavan Scott, Justina Ireland, Claudia Gray, and Danielle Jose Older, all of whom are incredible. We've been working on it for several years in very close connection with Lucasfilm Story Group. We've been up to Skywalker Ranch a bunch of times. Like, it's huge. We all hope it's the next big thing. Reaction's been great so far, and we just cannot wait for you guys to learn more about it.
I'm very excited for it. As someone who reads all of the Star Wars novels, I'm very stoked. I have one more question for all of you guys, just to wrap this up. Star Wars means different things to different people, but I think it all means something very deep to all of us. For me, Star Wars has always taught me that anybody can be a hero, no matter who you are in your own small way. It's possible to be brave and be a hero. I would love to know, just from each one of you, very quickly, just to wrap it up, what has Star Wars taught you, or what does Star Wars mean to you? Let's start with Jody.
That one person, no matter what type of power they have or what their skills are, they can make a difference across the galaxy.
I love that. Yeah, Greg.
Sorry, technical difficulty there, unmuting myself. Hope, right? That's it, hope.
That's great. Kieron.
Never get in a fight with a blind man near a Sarlacc pit. That just don't do it. Never do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Charles.
I guess family can be found or made, or like there's all different kinds of families, and they're all valid, and they all can help you get through this crazy journey in this galaxy not so far away.
Amazing. Jody, Greg, Kieron, Charles, thank you so much for joining us today at Keystone Comic-Con. All the folks at Read Pop, this was wonderful. And I hope that everyone watching goes and checks out all our excellent creators today on Twitter. They are all there all the time, probably too often lately.
Too much. Yeah.
I mean, speaking personally, but we really appreciate it, and keep hope alive, and we'll see you guys in the universe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.